All right, welcome back to the Conservatine. I'm your host, Chase Levitt, and today I have a very special guest joining us. She is a very successful firearm instructor. She is a Turning Point USA contributor, and she is the host of TPUSA's Reloaded.
Mhm.
Paige Roux, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Chase.
No problem. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about who you are, what you do with TPUSA, and a little bit about your career as a firearm instructor?
I have an interesting background. I'm 25 years old. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, born and raised, and I'm still here. But my dad was in the military and he was in law enforcement. And when I was about 4 years old, he purchased a shooting range in Phoenix, and it's called Shooter's World. And so uh, basically, my daycare center was a room at the range. And when he went to work, me and my brother would go upstairs, and we just knew dad was working, and we would go upstairs and hang out for the day. Or if I wanted to go down and help him, I would dust shelves and product and whatever. But that's how I grew up. So I knew firearm safety at a very young age. And basically, fast forward, it just became it was a family business. So if I wanted to make extra money over the summer, I would help him teach classes. I would work the front desk. I would help people sign up for classes, help people use the range. It was normal to me. It also was during a time where the Second Amendment wasn't people weren't trying to take the Second Amendment away. So it was everything was very normal, at least for me. And then in 2017 or 2018, I believe, I became a certified firearms instructor because I turned 21. And so I did that, and I truly was doing it because I knew the curriculum already. And I said, well, I was actually going to college for um, like tourism management and hotel management. And so I became a firearms instructor just to make a little extra money in between classes. And I had no idea that it was going to be my passion. 2020 hit. I started teaching more because more people were buying guns. That's around the same time that Turning Point reached out to me. So I dropped out of college because of all the vaccine mandates and the masks. And I was like, I'm not doing this. And I also found my passion. So I'm now a full-time firearms instructor. I'm under my own LLC. So I travel around the country teaching people about firearms. And then Turning Point USA reached out to me, and I'm their firearm contributor when it comes to the Second Amendment. So I go to high schools and colleges during the semester to talk to you guys about the importance of the Second Amendment. And I also have a gun show that's super fun, and the second season should be coming out soon.
That is really cool. Um,
Just got thrown into it, basically.
yeah. Have you enjoyed being with TPUSA?
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. It's a blast. I signed with them last summer of 2021, and I really was not political. Like I said, like I grew up where I was like, everyone loves guns. I don't know what you're talking about. Until I realized that no one really, there's a lot of people who don't like guns. And so I I was nervous, kind of like what we were just talking about, how you felt like you didn't have the courage to start this podcast. I felt like I didn't have the courage or the knowledge to argue and fight for the Second Amendment. And I was like, why me? So I signed with them, and they were very gracious. And I just basically, whatever I was comfortable with, they allowed me to do. And I've gotten more confident with the Second Amendment and fighting for that and speaking to people about it. So it at first it was like drinking from a fire hose. It was a lot. It was just you sign a contract, and now you're speaking on stage, and you're talking to all these schools. Um, and now I feel like, okay, I got this. I feel comfortable now. But all of that was because of Turning Point. It was crazy.
Yeah, that is really cool. Turning Point is a great organization.
Have
Um,
have you been to any of the events yet?
no, but I'm really hoping to go to America Fest this December.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah,
So, America Fest is I mean, it's in my backyard basically.
yeah,
So, oh my gosh, that's such a fun one because I believe last year they had 10,000 people go to it.
that's
And
crazy.
I mean, it's all day
Yeah,
for 3 or 4 days. It's massive, but so amazing.
yeah. I'm really hoping that I'll be able to go because, yeah, I watched a lot of things from last year's America Fest
Mhm.
and was just really jealous that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I'm excited if I'm able to go.
Good.
But my first question I want to ask you is, you've been very involved with firearms your whole life, like you said. So I want to ask you, what are some very basic firearm safety rules when operating any type of firearm, that anybody should know?
Yeah, this is a good one. So, I'll tell you mine. Uh, these rules are universal. A lot of people do 4 rules that reflect what you learn in the military. Personally, so those 4 rules are the same as mine. I just kind of spread them out and split them up into 5. And I use terminology that's more for civilians
Hmm.
and the students that I'm teaching. So 5 rules that I like to say is rule number 1 is always assume every firearm is loaded. If you don't know how to check a firearm. So if something's sitting there, you have no firearm knowledge, assume the gun is loaded. Just treat it with respect. Don't try to figure it out. Go ask someone for help if you aren't comfortable with doing that. Same thing with rule number 1. If you know how to safely check a firearm, I like splitting that one off and saying, know the condition of the gun, meaning know if it's loaded, know if it's unloaded, know if there's a magazine in it, know the condition if you have the knowledge to know that. So, one of those 2. Rule number 2 is point your firearm in a safe direction. Safe direction is going to be completely dependent on where your location is at. Number 3 is keep your trigger finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. So this is a big one for me. Whenever you pick up a firearm, always make sure your trigger finger, which is your dominant hand index finger, make sure that is off the trigger at all times and it's actually straight along the frame of the gun. Rule number 4 is know your target and what surrounds it. So this would be what is stopping your bullet. So if you're shooting outdoors or on an indoor range, uh, what is your target? Are you hitting cans or paper? And then that is not going to stop the bullet. So what is actually stopping your bullet? A lot of people use like the side of a mountain or a berm, things like that. Just making sure that you're safe. Your 360 degrees are safe. And then rule number 5 is maintain control of your gun. So this would be for anyone who owns a firearm who's 18 or over. If you're an owner of a firearm, you're maintaining control of that gun. So while you're shooting it, while it's at home or while you're transporting it, that it's locked away and that you are the only person who has access to it.
Yeah, thank you for that response. I thought since I had you on, I would ask you that question since you know so much to help educate myself and anyone who listens. So thank you for that.
That's a good one.
Um, so the first big question I have is, so we've seen gun violence over our country, over the history of our country, like
Yeah.
since the beginning of the time. But we've seen a lot within the last 3 to 4 months, specifically the Uvalde shooting, the Highland Park, the Buffalo shooting, and the mall shooting in Indiana. And so many far left anti-Second Amendment Democrats believe that gun control is the answer to these mass shootings. So what I want to ask you is, why won't gun control laws bring down gun violence, specifically gun control laws like red flag laws that Republicans are even trying to push?
They're they have the wrong agenda and they're targeting the wrong thing. So I'm going to break this down a little bit, and I could completely spiral on this topic. So I'll try to keep it a little brief. But one thing is, yes, there are shootings that are happening. Something that I have noticed, especially in the industry and with the culture that we're in now, a lot of these shootings are happening because these shooters want attention. They come from an upbringing where they're not receiving attention, or they don't have moral values. And what the media is doing is that they're advertising these shootings because they have an agenda. So there's 2 different sides, right? So there's an from I mean this administration that's in here now, they want guns to go away. They don't want us to have the Second Amendment. They say to your face, we want you to be safe, but really their agenda is to completely disarm law-abiding citizens. So what better to do that is that if there is a shooting that's happening, well, we're going to highlight that and we're going to react emotionally because everyone everyone's going to have a reaction. Naturally, we want to fix something. And the easiest and most reactive thing to do is say, well, let's blame the tool. Let's just get rid of the tool because it's immediate. It's an immediate response that we can change. But fixing the actual mental illness of these shooters takes too much effort for us to dissect. The easiest and most reactive response is ban guns. That helps the government, the left, or whoever, gun control advocates say, yep, that's exactly, these shootings are the gun problem. This is why. So they're saying that, and individuals, citizens are watching the news and they're saying, well, yeah, I agree with them because this is sad. We don't want children to die. So we agree. We want guns to be gone because it makes them feel like they're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting to the root. It's a surface level. Let's just fix this. On the other side of it, why a lot of these shootings are happening is because this shooter, right? Let's say event number 1, this shooter, a shooting happens. Now the media is covering it because they have an agenda over here. They are covering it extensively. We don't learn about the victims, we learn about the shooter. We know the shooter's name, we know the shooter's background. Now, the world's or nation's attention is going to this one individual. We're not paying attention to the lives or the names of the family. We always remember the name of the shooter. And so that happens. It's all over social media. It's all over the news. It is trending information. So someone with a mental illness who has a very similar background, who is mentally ill, sees that and says, oh, that's how I get attention. That's how I get remembered. I'm going to go do that. And it's a repetitive and repetitive and repetitive. So for instance, there are accidents that happen on indoor shooting ranges all over the world or all over the country, right? So if there is a time where we have to call 911 or an ambulance, it happens like rarely. But if there is something that happens where we need to call 911, the news, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, the news used to come out because they can tap into the 911 call, and they would come out to the store and ask my dad, who is the owner of our shooting range, for a comment. And my dad finally said, if you want more of these events to happen, then continue to interview me. But I will not interview because you are literally telling the next person, how to do it. You are giving them a step-by-step, this is how this happens. So we don't just sitting and watching the news, no one's dissecting it in these 3 different ways. I have the background, I've seen it happen, and this is part of my job, is I dissect this. But that is why they want gun control. There's 3 different motives, right? Civilians want to do something, right? We need action, we want action, we just don't really know what that action is. Mm-hmm. So we're going to react. Government has a motive, and then the shooters need attention and want to be remembered. So all of this is happening all while blaming firearms. Firearms are not the issue. Did you notice that the Indiana shooting, where that 22-year-old man shot 40 yards, which is far, with a pistol, and 8 out of 10 rounds hit the target or hit the shooter? Did you notice that it hit news, but we don't talk about it anymore? We're more so still talking about Buffalo and Uvalde because it follows the agenda. So, but that one shooting doesn't help their agenda in any way. So the news isn't covering it anymore. It's no longer. We're not talking about what was his background? How did he get that type of training? How long has he trained? How can someone be that accurate? So the reason why gun control is not going to work is because what we don't cover, or what is not covered on the mainstream media, is that 60,000 to 2.5 million lives are saved every year because of self-defense use with a firearm. We don't cover any of those. I follow accounts on Instagram and YouTube where they cover those stories, so I get to see them. I'll share them on my Instagram,
Mhm.
but you don't see that on mainstream media, CNN or whatever. When you turn on the news, you don't see any of that. So people don't realize that firearms are actually saving lives. They're only seeing this minute uh, uh, occurrence of when firearms aren't, and a lot of those are gang related. So it won't work, but it's they're manipulating. I mean, it's all manipulative.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned how the government, although they just want to take away our guns, right? Um, and we saw it in Congress just recently, last Friday, that House Democrats and Nancy Pelosi tried, they didn't try, but they forced an early vote on HR 1808, or the assault weapons ban, that will ban law-abiding Americans from purchasing many types of firearms.
Yeah.
And it passed 217 to 213, with five Democrats voting against it, which that was good. But we also had two Republicans, quote unquote Republicans, voting against it. So what I want to ask you is, what is your opinion on HR 1808 and that whole situation?
It is scary. It is literally the one of the scariest bills that I've ever seen. There has been an attempt on bills like this to that have been introduced, but nothing has even gotten passed, even introduced to the House,
Mhm.
or past a certain committee meeting. So the fact that this one passed is scary. However, I'll give you my theory on it. But basically, in this bill, they call it an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons is a made up term.
Mhm.
It sounds scary, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why
Uh-huh.
they coined this term. But assault weapons actually definition is is not a term. It doesn't reflect any type of firearm. Um, so what they're referencing is assault weapons makes civilians feel, people like you and me, it makes it sound like machine guns, like
Mhm.
military, what do they call it?
Like
Military
military
weapons. Like,
grade, whatever.
yes, military grade
Yeah.
weapons that like incinerate your bones. Like this doesn't I don't know how they come up with this. I'm almost impressed by their creativity. So that is the idea of assault weapon. What they're actually banning in this bill, if you read it, they specifically name gun manufacturers specific firearms, like list hundreds of firearms. And a lot of these include obviously semi-automatic rifles, whether that's an AR-15 or not. A lot of semi-automatic rifles. It also, the way that they are listing this ban, it includes things like pistol grips. It includes different attributes that actually explain a handgun. And so in that bill, deep down, it will actually ban a decent amount of handguns as well. And people don't realize that because they say, okay, all these shootings have been happening. I need to act. This is my way of doing that. So I support HR 1808. It's so manipulative in there. It's so yucky. So my theory on it is that yes, it passed the House. It's going to get to the Senate. A few of my friends and colleagues say the Senate is not going to pass it. There's no way. I am going into it just because of what's been happening, how they even rushed this vote.
Yeah.
It's going to somehow get passed through the Senate. When it does, there's already action. Gun Policy Coalition is a great organization to follow.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, NRA, they have like a legal group as well that fight bills like this for us. And
Mhm.
so what they will do, what I'm thinking of what's going to happen is they are either going to sue the government or they'll team up with a state representative or a governor, and they will have the state sue the government or the federal government, because that will immediately get it pushed or more quickly to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has to deem this unconstitutional because there is literally no way that this supports our Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So that it's scary. They're trying, but that's why this Second Amendment and the Constitution itself is so important, because no matter how hard they try, no matter who's in office, there's checks and balances. And
Yeah.
they can pass this as a gun store. As soon as they pass it, we have to comply.
Mhm.
So if that happens, we basically have to pull all guns, but we have to wait until the Supreme Court deems it unconstitutional. Now, what I'm thinking, and I think what a lot of people think, is that once this is passed, there's 400 million guns owned by Americans. Okay.
Mhm.
Not all of those are on the banned list, but let's call it half because it's a very long list.
Yeah.
It's not there was a previous ban that actually Biden presented in the 90s, and that was his assault weapons ban. He's
Mhm.
doing it again.
Yeah.
They didn't renew that. So what that basically meant was they banned, or I'm sorry, it was 1986. They banned machine guns or full auto. Anything to that point you could own legally. It was all grandfathered in, but anything after you couldn't own. So same thing with this. I own a lot of the guns that are on that banned list. I would be grandfathered in. There's no like they're gonna come knocking on my door and take my gun away because now it's banned. It would be grandfathered in, but to that point, the day after, I wouldn't be able to go buy that gun again. That is what that ban will do.
Yeah. So with all these threats, with this bill trying to limit the firearms that you can go out and just buy,
Yeah.
how can we, people like me or you or anybody else, just everyday American citizens, fight to protect our Second Amendment?
So a few things. My biggest one I would say is, because how old are you?
I'm 16.
You're 16. So you can't own a firearm yet.
Yeah.
So what I would do is, one, follow it's NRA is a good one, and gun policy.
Yeah.
They're on Instagram. But definitely follow those because they keep you very, very up to date on the Second Amendment and bills to fight for. And they do real time notifications on when the House or when there's a committee meeting. So that's a good way, just as anyone, to be up to date and informed. And they break it down for you really easily. So not only that, but they have links. So if you want to vote against or you want to contact your state legislator, they have links and they pre-write a petition for you. So you click on the link. So every time something like this happens, or HR 1808, I clicked on the link, I typed in, I believe it was just my zip code, and they immediately sent, it took me literally like 30 seconds, but I fill out my information and they send it and they say, oh, okay, your representative is this person in this district. You read what they have drafted for you. You can change it or alter it if you'd
Yeah.
like. And then you hit submit. That 30 seconds does wonders. Now you are actually having a voice in your area. That is how you fight for the Second Amendment. And you can do that with any bill, firearm, or honestly, anything related. But since we're speaking about guns, anything firearm related, you could do that. Just voicing, I don't like this. So that's a way to do it. Attend those committee meetings. I'm actually going to start getting into that once the session restarts in January, of attending these meetings about whatever you're against. For me, obviously, anything firearm or gun control related. So I'm going to attend this meeting and speak to my representative saying, hey, I am a voter and this isn't right and here's why, so that they can hear me. That takes a lot of courage. It takes time. But that is another way that you can step up and do something. Another thing is, honestly, going to the range, practicing, taking classes. We have classes for for people your age, and you can learn firearm safety. You can talk and advocate for, hey, I learned how to safely use a firearm today, and I think it's important. Talk about that. Another thing is Breitbart posts uh, a lot of events where firearms were used uh, in a defensive situation where it saved lives. Share that information. That is how you fight for the Second Amendment. You're putting the information out there to make the gun control advocates having to play on defense. So pushing all that information out there, we need to get a lot better at that, because two-way advocates and honestly people who are more conservative, we're always defensive,
Yeah.
because our values are you do you, I'll do me, and we'll leave each other alone and we'll live in peace and great. The left is completely different. They want to play offensive. They want to fight. They want whatever they believe, they want you to believe as well, regardless on if you do, and they'll be willing to fight and cause any type of drama in order to make that happen. That's why all these laws are coming out.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of play that game. We need to be more offensive. It's not what we're used to, but that is how we are going to save the Second Amendment.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I do follow NRA and the gun policy, but I didn't know that you could go on and draft, or they already had the already drafted letter or whatever it
Yeah.
is to send your representative. That's really cool. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I have one more question for you, and it's just something that I've just randomly thought about here and there, but I want to know your opinion on it. Sh- the question is, should there be firearm safety courses required in schools? Because I know some countries do, well, maybe not required, but offered.
Yeah.
Because I know some countries do that. Do you believe that should be a thing here in the US?
I think that would be amazing. I mean, they used to do it in the past. They used to do a marksmanship class in the past, because
Really?
you're learning. I mean, if you think about it, in the past, firearms were used for hunting, obviously defending the home, defending the land, your property, whatever it may be. Firearms have been part of this country. That's why, I mean, we used firearms to make this country. And
Yeah.
so it was used because it's, hey, you're going to be working, you're going to be needing to use this firearm, you need to know how to safely use it. We have gotten to the part, we've forgotten that firearms are also a sport. It's also an empowering hobby.
Yeah.
There's competitions. Kids can get scholarships for marksmanship shooting or competition shooting, and all different types, long range. There's all of these different avenues with firearms. We're forgetting that is a main core of the firearm industry. And yes, there's a defensive side for adults of being able to carry it on your body, but that's all we focus on. So, I mean, for example, I teach my students all the time. There's grown adults come in and they're nervous because they put all of this pressure on them that they're shooting a firearm to defend themselves, and it's the possibility of, I have to save my family, and it's all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I say, hey, you've never shot a gun before. You need to remember that you're just trying to shoot the bullseye. We're safely learning how to use a firearm. It's a tool, and we're just here to have fun. Like, let's experience it before going down that path. And that's what you're teaching kids. You're teaching them how to have respect for a firearm. I don't think it should be required. It's one of those that, hey, if you want to do this, it's like a sport. It's like football or tennis, whatever, basketball. Go and be on the shooting team. I was on the archery team for my college when I was in for a semester. So much fun. But it was a club. So we had an archery club. You can have a marksmanship club of basic firearm safety, and just teaching kids how to have that maturity to handle and respect firearms. I would love it. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I would love to have that in my high school. I feel like that would be really like helpful,
Yeah,
educational, and just to give more knowledge to people to, like you said, feel more safe holding a firearm and not be
exactly.
scared.
Exactly.
But so that is all I have for you today, but
Awesome.
I want to thank you so much for your time, and your insight and knowledge was greatly appreciated. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yep, no problem. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah, we'll see you at AmFest.
Oh yeah, that would be so fun.
Sounds good.
Thank you.